Hello everyone and welcome back again to our Nintendo Switch in 2020 prediction mini-series. We have now been able to go over the challenges coming from the next-gen systems from Sony and Microsoft, the first half of the Nintendo Switch in 2020, and ended up at E3 2020, where we asked one big question. Well, I asked a big question to Rogersbase, who's once again with me.
Hello!
Could Zelda be the only focus, just as it was during the E3 2016 Nintendo showcase?
So, I think it could be. I think they definitely could do that. Zelda's a big enough thing if that's going to be their big holiday game that they just make that big push, especially considering how little E3 really matters to Sony and Microsoft now. They're all off doing their own thing, and Nintendo's kind of doing the same thing as well. I think they could do that. I think they could just go, you know what? Breath of the Wild 2 blowout, here's 30 minutes of the new game. You guys get to play it, come to our really awesome looking booth, and that's that. But I don't think they're going to do that, just with how many games we already know are coming in the near future for the Switch that have already been announced that we still need to find out information about. Things like Bayonetta 3, things like Metroid, things like whatever Retro's been working on, potentially a new Pikmin, potentially like a new Mario Kart even. I mean, plus all the third-party games we already know about, the new Ace Attorney, Shin Megami Tensei, Overwatch 2. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they're bringing to the system. I don't know about you. To me, that was a huge surprise seeing that Overwatch 2 trailer on the Nintendo YouTube channel about a week and a half ago. When I saw that, I truly did not expect Overwatch 2 to come to Switch alongside the other systems. I thought that was going to be something that would be way further down the line. I knew they were thinking about bringing it over, but I was really happy when they announced that because I've really been enjoying playing Overwatch on my Switch. I was a huge fan of that game when it first came out. I played a ton of it on PS4. I played a ton of it on PC. I've already put like 60 hours into it on my Switch. And so being able to transfer all that data over to, like finding out that you'll be able to take all your costumes and everything from the initial Overwatch into your Overwatch 2 game is super exciting to me. So just thinking about all the stuff they got, plus, of course, more Smash Brothers characters, too. I think next year is going to be amazing. And depending on what gets announced in January, I think they really have the potential to blow us out with some amazing surprises at this E3.
I do agree, and the Nintendo Switch is definitely no Wii U in 2016, when the only thing we had to look forward to was Zelda, and we already knew going into the event that, oh, this is going to launch along with the next system, so you know, this version is not going to matter in a few months' time. So I have a feeling that, yes, Zelda might even be the big opening act of E3 2020, much like they did with Skyward Sword in 2011, you know, for the 25th anniversary of Zelda, because I have a feeling that E3, they are not going to save it until E3 2021, and that is because Skyward Sword is turning 10, and the franchise is also turning 35, and they probably want to coincide that with the 10th anniversary of Skyward Sword, and then whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all about Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. I have a feeling that it might take up much more space than it did at this E3. That's for sure. And then it's going to have its own section or booth, just like Luigi's Mansion 3 had. But it's probably not going to be the only game present, unless the other games are smaller. But I have a feeling that they're not going to do that again, that no other games are going to be.
Can I make a very specific prediction about Zelda? A very specific E3 prediction. I think E3 is, if Zelda is playable in Breath of the Wild 2, if that's what that initial trailer was telling us, where now she cut her hair, I think that reveal happens at E3. I think even if we end up getting a Breath of the Wild 2 trailer or teaser during the January Direct, I think E3 is when they would announce, oh, by the way, Zelda's playable. Like, boom, that's a megaton announcement, secondary playable character. That's my prediction specifically for Breath of the Wild 2 at E3. I think that's when we find out that Zelda's actually playable in this game.
I have a feeling for that as well. I think it's more likely that we get maybe a story hint trailer regarding Ganondorf in January. Yeah.
Whoo, man, I can't wait for Ganondorf. Dude, we're gonna get. Could I fanboy for a second? The fact that I'm still hype about this after seeing this at last E3, but like the fact that Ganondorf is going to exist in the Breath of the Wild world now is just so exciting to me. Like, don't get me wrong, I actually liked Calamity Ganon. I like what they did with the story with Breath of the Wild. I like that it was more open-ended, but you know, really reeling it in and telling a very specific story is, I think, going to be their main focus for this next game, considering that was the big complaint with Breath of the Wild that people had. Like, I actually loved Breath of the Wild the way that it was. I genuinely do.
But that's also why the final boss was so so underwhelming.
Exactly, because there wasn't really a story. Exactly, and so now they really have Ganondorf in the world. Like, oh, what's he gonna look like? I'm so excited.
I think all of us are, and that's why I think a whole trailer dedicated to Ganondorf in the first Nintendo Direct will be a perfect build-up to then show full gameplay, all new, brand new features at E3. That would be just a perfect build-up. Like, first it's just like, here's Ganondorf. He's going to be more dangerous than ever before, and show all his evil doings leading up to this final confrontation that they are building up with this game.
Yeah.
I think this Zelda game is going to be so much more than Breath of the Wild, because they're taking what Breath of the Wild was and then adding to it multiple times when it comes to story, dungeons, weapons, enemies, villain, and so on.
And that's just insane to me, too. I mean, considering how amazing the original Breath of the Wild is, the fact that they're going to try to top it is... I mean, that is a Herculean task, to try to top one of the best games of all time. And,
well, one way to do it, Roger, is to give Ganondorf a voice.
Well, sure. I mean, if Ganondorf has some awesome, sweet voice acting, I'd be down with that. I think they probably would, considering some of the other characters that had voices in this one.
Mm-hmm. Even in flashbacks, like if this mummy Ganondorf is unable to talk and just make mumbles sounds or whatever, whatever, I don't care. But then again, the Sheikah monks were also able to talk. It's just that they didn't have voice acting, that's all. Okay, I think we'll move on a little bit further on. No More Heroes 3. I think this game could either be a summer game or something in the line of August, September.
Yeah, I was surprised to see this actually in this portion of the Google Doc when you were talking about things we'll talk about in Part 2 and Part 3, because to me, No More Heroes seems like something that will be out before E3 even happens. I feel like No More Heroes could be like a very early June, maybe late May type game.
That would be... I think it could fit, and it's like a game that is working because it would be a game that is kind of anticipated. No More Heroes has never sold well. That is one thing we can point out right away. But it's a game that a franchise that Nintendo in many ways helped upbring, I would say, in many ways. So I think that they want to give it a good slot so it doesn't get slaughtered by some other big IP that they decide to have sometime in the fall or holiday season.
Yeah, and I feel like May would be a good slot for it then.
Yeah, so then maybe Bayonetta 3 could be, Bayonetta 2 was like an October game, I think, on the Wii U.
I think it was, yeah, and that seems like the right time to release Bayonetta 3, right? I mean, we also don't know how long in development Bayonetta 3's been, so, I mean, Bayonetta 3 could end up being a 2021 game, but I feel
because
more
Vascular
likely
Chain
than...
last year, yeah.
Yeah, I think more likely than not, we're probably going to see a pretty big Bayonetta trailer during the first January Direct, and then I think it'll end up getting released sort of in that Astral Chain time slot from this year.
I think that fits well, but that leaves up some space for, I guess, September, October. Like, if Zelda is going to be the holiday game, it's probably going to get the November slot, because there's most likely no Pokemon game. We maybe could see some DLCs or expansions to Pokemon Sword and Shield.
Sure.
But I don't see much more than that. But I have a feeling that we're going to see one IP that we have been missing for a long time, and that has not been present at all at the Switch to this point. Like, one thing is, we know that a lot is going on at Retro Studios. I highly recommend checking Arlo's video on...
That video was great. Yeah, he did a really, really great breakdown of everything, and you're not really taking a stance of like, oh, this is what they're making, but just showing the facts and being like, all right, there's gotta be something there, and something must have gone wrong, so what's going on there?
Exactly, and that's why I wouldn't expect much from Retro at the moment. Right now, they are trying to figure out how they make Metroid Prime 4 live up and surpass the previous Prime games, because that's no easy feat to accomplish.
And I like that you brought this up too, because I think we're probably both in the same boat then, that this game is not coming out in 2020. Like, there's no way.
Oh, no, yeah. Absolutely not.
To me, like, Metroid Prime 4 to me feels like at earliest a late 2021 holiday game. Truly.
Or even a 2022 game.
Maybe even 2022, but I feel like at the latest, at the earliest, like late 2021. But that's interesting that you bring up Metroid, because I actually think we're going to get a lot of Metroid content this year. And specifically, there's two things. One, I feel like there's no way, because of how long it's been since the last Prime game, that they don't re-release the original Prime games on the Switch. And that could be something that gets announced in a January Direct, or something gets shown off at E3, where maybe we get the first big trailer for Metroid Prime 4 at E3, and then they say, by the way, obviously the game's still a ways off, but we want to let you guys know that coming this holiday, Metroid Prime Trilogy is coming to the Switch. You can play all the games in glorious HD. I think that would be really a great announcement for them, but I don't think that's the only Metroid game that's going to get announced this year. I actually think there's one other big Metroid thing that's going to get announced this year. And there's been rumors about this, and no one's really wanted to say, oh, this is definitely going to happen. But I feel pretty confident about this. Metroid Samus Returns sold pretty well, if I'm correct. Like, it ended up doing pretty good for what it was. I mean, it's a remake of Metroid 2, which has always been like the dark horse Metroid game anyway. And obviously the game was critically acclaimed. I would not be surprised if they gave the developer of Samus Returns license to remake Super Metroid. And they actually end up using the Samus Returns engine, up-resing it to HD, putting that on the Switch, and then remaking what is arguably the greatest video game of all time, and throwing that on Switch as sort of a bone to the Metroid fans that's not just an easy, simple port of Metroid Prime Trilogy that I think everybody's expecting. Especially considering, like, Link's Awakening did very well. They've been doing this a lot with remake games of their classic games. It just seems like a Super Metroid remake seems to make sense with where we are with the Switch right now.
Like, I think Retro Studios is happy for one thing, and that is that the Halo curse is not going to hit them again with Metroid Prime 4.
Right.
Like, Halo is coming out in 2020, and that's it. So it's not going to launch 2 weeks after Metroid Prime 4.
Sure.
Okay, but other games, franchises that we could look at. I think about 3 franchises. I think Pikmin 4, a Paper Mario reboot.
Can we just talk about this for a second? We have been talking about Pikmin 4 in literally every single discussion video dating back to prior to the Switch being called the Switch. Literally every single prediction video, every discussion video I've ever done, whether it was you or Game Explain or Josh or whoever, like, I've done so many of these discussion videos, and every single one Pikmin 4 comes up in, and every single time we say it's going to be this time, it's going to be this time, and it's never there. So I truly, don't know what the heck is going on with Pikmin 4, but I also believe that when we end up getting the announcement of Pikmin 4, that game is going to drop 2 months after. I think this is something they've been working on in the background for a long time, and they're just waiting to go, okay, we're announcing it this time, it's coming out in a couple months, and that's it. I don't think this is something that's going to have a lot of fanfare. I think it's something that will be released within months of the game being announced.
Pikmin 4 fits in 2 slots if it's coming in 2020.
Sure.
One is a reveal at the first Nintendo Direct and then a launch in May. I think May is a perfect... it's a big Nintendo first-party IP. It's a slot that has worked in the past. Look at Splatoon, look at some other games. And I just feel like that is you have enough span of time to to upload some trailers on your YouTube channel, because that's pretty much all you need for Pikmin 4.
And Pikmin makes sense in spring, right? That seems like the type of game they would release in the spring. There's flowers are blooming. They could do cute little marketing campaigns with flowers and with Pikmin. I just think it seems to make sense there. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if we end up getting... This would be a shock to a lot of people. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a Pikmin 4 announcement during that January Direct and a release as early as April.
If not that slot, I could see it coming sometime in the maybe September slot. The slot of Fire Emblem that was this year.
Yep.
For this game, if it exists, if it's not been cancelled, if it's going to show up again, that's the big question. Then we have another possibility, and that is that Paper Mario needs a reboot.
But that's my thing, is I don't think it's going to be a Paper Mario next year. I think we're getting a new 3D Mario game. I think that game gets announced in January's Direct, and I think it gets really blown out at E3 this year, and I think that's their big holiday game. Because I think the way I'm seeing the lineup right now, because, I mean, Zelda, Metroid, Mario, they've got these big names. I think January Direct, we're going to get tiny little glimpse of Breath of the Wild 2. We're probably not going to hear anything about Metroid, and we're going to get the announcement of a 3D Mario game with more information to come at E3. I think that 3D Mario game is their primary focus of this E3 next to Breath of the Wild. But I think Breath of the Wild comes out in March of 2021 on Switch, and then I think their big holiday game is an Odyssey 2 or a Galaxy 3 or something along those lines. I think just looking at the slots and what we've had with Mario games, right? When the system launched, we had Mario Odyssey within that first year, and then we got Mario Maker. And so I think it's going to be alternating, especially because now they've combined all of their teams together. I feel like it's going to alternate between 2D and 3D, and I think next year is the big 3D, and then the year after that is like another 2D one, either a new Super Mario Brothers type game, something along those lines. But I truly believe we're alternating between 2Ds and 3Ds.
Okay, but what about Mario Kart on Nintendo Kart?
I don't think we're going to get a Mario Kart game. I don't. I mean, with Tour coming out now and with all the stuff they're focusing on with that, they're doing the push for Tour, and that game is making so much money for them. Plus, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still selling like gangbusters. Like, wasn't that one of the top selling games this holiday season for the Switch? And that game is so old as it is. I don't think we're going to get a Mario Kart. I don't. I think if we're going to get any type of kart game, I think it's what you just mentioned. I think it's more of like a Nintendo Kart type thing, right? Where, not Smash Kart, but something along those lines, like a Nintendo All-Stars Kart or something, or a new adventure game type kart racing game, maybe something along the lines of like a Diddy Kong. But I really,
Diddy Kong Racing.
Yeah, like I could see
or Mario Kart DS for that matter.
Yeah. I don't think we're gonna see Mario Kart 9. I really truly don't think we're gonna see that on the Switch's life cycle. I think they're saving that for the launch of the next Switch in like 6 years from now. Truly, I think that's something that they're really holding on to and they're not going to release. Just because, again, Kart 8 is still selling gangbusters. It is the best-selling game on the system. So why would they make another one to then eat up the sales of that one? There's no reason. I think if anything else, they could maybe just go, okay, we're making a lot of money, let's make more DLC for it. You know, but I don't think they're going to do it. I really don't.
I have a feeling that we are in for some very big surprises when it comes to these IPs that have been dormant for quite some while. Because yes, Mario Kart has been... We haven't had a new Mario Kart in... now it's it's going to be over 5 years. No, wait, 6 years actually.
6 years. It's 6 years, yeah. And even while we're on the topic of Mario, though, I think another big thing that could get announced at E3 or maybe January is I think we're going to get a sequel to Super Mario Party. Because that game sold 7 million, more than 7 million units, like 8 million units on the Switch. And, the reaction to that was mixed, but I actually really had a lot of fun with that game. And I'm not somebody who enjoys the Mario Party franchise. I never have. But I had as much fun with Super Mario Party as I did with the original games on N64, I think. So, to me, if they end up making a sequel for Super Mario Party, I'd be down for that. You throw that out in the holiday season of next year. I think that'd be another thing that really
make
pushes
it bigger
units.
and better.
Yeah, make it bigger and better.
I think they already did a good job getting rid of that stupid car and then bringing back the old Mario Party mechanics, which is a board game but with these awesome mini games.
I really think the only thing that was really lacking in Super Mario Party was boards and characters. I think if you just add... Yeah, instead of like 4 boards, put in 8 boards, and instead of the small group of characters they have now, again, add new characters like Egad, Pauline, whatever, call it a day. And there you go. Make Super Mario Party 2, push that out for the holiday, it's gonna sell gangbusters, you're good to go.
So we can make a prediction, and that is that the Nintendo Direct will be full of new first-party game announcements.
Yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of new IPs going into next year as well. I think, ARMS obviously benefited from coming out in that very first year, but ARMS sold very, very well. People still forget about that game, but it sold incredibly well. And I think that team is probably working on something else now. And so I would like to see if they're coming up with a new IP, or like the Splatoon team. I think a lot of them went to go work at Animal Crossing, but still in all, I wouldn't be surprised to see some more really surprising new IPs from Nintendo and their developers moving into next year.
And then I think a lot of focus is also going to be dedicated to DLC fighters coming to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Like in the last part we talked about the first DLC after the Fighter Pass is concluded, and we realized one thing, and that is that these might just be fighters, without stages, and no packs, just characters.
Yeah, especially if they're from Nintendo franchises, right? I think that was the big push of the first Fighter Pass, was it's franchises that haven't been in Smash Brothers before. They need stages, they need music, they need representation. But now if you're adding like, Geno or Edelgard or whatever, I mean, there's already so many Mario and Fire Emblem stages, you don't need that. If you're throwing in another Pokemon from this generation, like, you don't need any more of that. You don't need any more Pokemon stages. Just throw a new gen Pokemon in there and call it a day. I feel like we could have a Let's Go Sinnoh or a Let's Go Johto or just a full-on remake of Sinnoh moving into next year. I don't think we're going to get an expansion for Sword and Shield just yet. I think it's too early. That's probably another 2-3 years out. But I could totally see them doing like a Let's Go game next year. And while we're on the topic of Pokemon too, I think this goes back to like bring everything full circle to what we talked about in part 1. Because of the success of the Switch, I have no doubt in my mind we're getting 2 new full Pokemon generations on the system. And I have no doubt that the one we're currently in with Sword and Shield is going to last at least 3 years. I think we're looking at a minimum of 3 years with just the Sword and Shield stuff before we get any type of new generation talk at all. Probably even 4. And I still think the Switch is going to be running high and selling units and, doing a lot of great stuff and releasing new games even that far into the future.
Yeah, but the question is, will they be able to maintain the great third-party support that they had to this point?
I think they will because of one thing. I think a lot of the games that are newer games that are on PS4 and on Xbox One right now, I think the developers will have found a way to bring those games over to Switch by that point in the life cycle. Working with these new hardware and all this other stuff, I think like you brought up in that first part, when we're looking at something like the games that are coming out on the new hardware, obviously those games are never going to come to Switch. There's no feasible way to bring those over. But we've seen with stuff like The Witcher 3 and with Skyrim, you could bring over these really massive games, Overwatch even. You could bring these massive games over to the Switch and they're going to run no problem. Overwatch runs great. Witcher runs great. It's like, they can do it.
We just got the reveal of Bravely Default 2. Is this also a second half of the year game, or do you think it might actually be the first?
I could see that being in a September-October slot, similar to what Octopath Traveler was.
And then we are waiting for the first true Ace Attorney game, because we got the Ace Attorney trilogy on the Switch, and I have a feeling that Capcom might deliver this year.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that could be an end-of-the-year game. Again, though, the end of the year is really looking stacked too. That's what I'm saying is they can really space out their releases. We know that Switch is going to have this massive long life cycle, so there's no reason to have Zelda and Mario and Metroid and all this stuff come out in 1 year, and Bayonetta, right? I mean, even just talking about the smaller stuff we brought up already, things like Bayonetta 3, Bravely Default 2, Ace Attorney. There's a lot of stuff they can really build out and make a solid holiday for next year, even with only one of their big first parties, whether that's, Zelda or Mario.
We still have Shin Megami Tensei 5 that was revealed at a Nintendo Switch presentation back in 2017. I think it's time for it to come out now in 2020.
Yeah. Or at least find out more information about it. I could see a release of that game in Japan in November, December of next year, with then a worldwide release coming in February or March, similar to what happened with Persona 5 Royale.
And since we're on the topic of Persona 5 Royale, do you see any way that it's going to be ported?
That game is for sure coming to Switch. But I feel very strongly Persona 5, even if it's just the vanilla version or the Royal version, that game is coming to Switch. No doubt about it. Atlas likes money. We've obviously got the Persona Scramble game coming out in the early half of next year. Dude, at some point, Persona 5 is coming to the Switch, whether it's vanilla or Royal, but I think it's probably going to end up being the Royal version, and I think there's probably a timed exclusivity on that for PlayStation, even if they're not talking about it. And so to me, I think maybe we'll see Persona 5 Royal come to Switch in September or August of next year.
Okay, I think that sums up the third-party exclusives. I also have Nintendo Switch Online here. We talked a little bit about that in part 1. What we concluded there was maybe a new SNES game or two every 2 months, just like we saw now with Star Fox 2, and then probably not expect any kind of expansion to the service until the typical September Direct, when we could get N64 games and then maybe an N64 controller.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the final point of this whole discussion, namely hardware. Will we see finally the Nintendo Switch Pro? Because we know these games, like Overwatch 2, are better in 60 frames per second. Let's face it. And we also would love to have a Zelda in 60 frames per second. There is a difference when you play The Witcher in 30 frames and in 60 frames. So that's another big selling point, and I feel okay, if Zelda is delayed to 2021 or comes out in 2021, we're not talking about any delays yet, then do you think that the Switch Pro would still coincide with the launch of Zelda?
I think that would be the time to bring it out if they're going to do it. Or a new Nintendo Switch or whatever they're going to end up calling it, whatever the revision is going to be. I think 4 years later is the sweet spot for when we get whatever new Nintendo Switch is. Yeah, 2021, which again could coincide with Zelda. Yeah, exactly 4 years later. It was November to November, 4 years later for the DS. It's going to be March to March for the Switch. There you go. New Nintendo Switch, Nintendo Switch Eye or whatever you're going to call it, whatever they're going to call it, right, with Breath of the Wild 2. There you go. And then we'll get the year after that, the XL or Lite version or whatever that is.
I don't think people care if Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 comes out in March 2021 or November 2020.
That'd be awesome.
It's just a 4 month gap. No one cares.
And if it came out in March 2021, that'd be awesome. It'd be exactly 4 years later, long development cycle, launches alongside, a new Nintendo Switch. That's great.
Like, Nintendo loves the strategy. They see that the strategy with bringing a new Zelda as a launch title for the next gen.
It works. It works. It worked with Wii and it worked with Switch. Why not do it again?
Thank you so much for joining in to this mini-series. Roger is probably also going to leave a comment, which I'm going to pin, so that you can show some love to him as well. And also go and check out his YouTube channel, including his many Game Awards reactions. Other than that, make sure to leave a like on all these videos, subscribe to both of our channels, press the shiny notification bell as well, so that you get notifications when we upload new videos. And with that, we hope you have a great 2020, hopefully full of surprises and great Nintendo announcements. Once again, before we end, we have to just say thank you for everything, Erika.
Yes.
It was an incredible run. It's sad that it ended so soon, way too soon. But we will always remember you and we'll never forget you. You will be a legend in the Nintendo community forever.